What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Apostrophe. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic. You should know that if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. Apostrophe. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. My wife actually did this on her interview about working on some Saturdays. She politely refused on grounds of traveling time, but obliged to chip in from home if a client needed something urgently. She got the job. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. On a second interview, the general manager brought me into the conference room with his 8 managers present. At first I thought it was a meet and greet, but no. They grilled me for an hour and a half. Didn't appreciate that, along with a couple other things, and politely withdrew from being considered. Couple months later, in playing in a ball tournament and come across one of the managers, I mentioned how weird that interview was. He says, "Weird for you? Ha. I found out then and there you were being interviewed for my job." Yep. Dodged a bullet there. I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone, except me, signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy attached, without other pages. There was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the hour drone said, "Okay, I guess me is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much." Apostrophe. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that hours reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me and they weren't able to. When they ask out of nowhere, "What clients can you bring with you?" I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. Sure, it wasn't an interview with an MLM. Last job I worked. Yay. Everyone here is new. But it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back. So being your own lunch, you'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Eater also was told by my trainer, "You want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job." This was like my second weekend. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me, and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen, because they didn't even try to hide it. This actually happened to me. Interviewer: "Do you have any questions for us?" Me: "What is a challenge this department has recently faced?" Interviewer: "Job security." Mayo gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. Dude probably about to quit and was like, "Better save this guy before I dip." A true homie. My favorite is there's a lot of people waiting in line to work here. Count yourself lucky. Huge red flag. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I hate that in any situation, not just jobs. Buying something big like a car and they're like, "Oh, it's just standard contract stuff." Let me decide if it's standard. You know full well, if I sign this, I've agreed to whatever the duck is written. Company, standard contract stuff. Don't need to read it, just sign. Also, company, when in court, you should have read the contract to know what you were signing. I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate. So to attract me, the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that 1. He could easily cherry pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. 2. The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry, or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. 3. He showed me other people pay stubs. WTF? Question mark? Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what. That lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. I was interviewed for a job like this. When I walked into the interview, it was made clear that the job was being offered and was mine if I wanted it. On my credentials alone, it was a library supervisor job at a rare items and fine arts library. An hour into the interview, despite asking several times, they couldn't tell me what I would be doing. Slowly, it came out that there were frequent fights in the library I would need to break up. Student mental breakdowns I would somehow have to handle as a mental health professional. The kicker was that the library held a lot of fine art, and I would need to stop people from, literally, stealing the Warhols. They wanted a librarian who I guess was somehow Batman. I got an email that the position was dissolved 6 months later. I didn't know it at the time, but "you'll be wearing many hats" was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto, if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, "Oh, she's not here today," in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW, but could come in any time THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews, and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. "Hello, I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow?" I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself from the company. Apostrophe. This is illegal in most US states. Unknown about outside the US. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face. With the caption, "I spoke with boss name about it. I guess we are still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. If you can see the floor before the interview, you can sometimes get a vibe about the place. I once went to interview for a sales position. Aside from the interviewer being 30 minutes late, it did allow me to sit and observe the situation. I realized pretty quickly this was not going to be the place for me. Very quiet except a handful of people on the phones cold calling. Many reps trying to push for contacts on the other end. Just painful to listen to, and when they'd hang up there wasn't really any interaction with co-workers. Just quiet, and then another call. It all seemed very tense. I noped out of there real quick after the 5 minutes the interview took. Dodged a bullet. I had interviewed for a call center job at another place that says a complete 180 from that. Yes, it's a call center job, so it is what it is. But there was laughter on the floor. People talking to floor managers. Just a completely different vibe that was more inviting. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. If they seem so relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work. Tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work a different department than what I applied for. When you ask, what do you like about working here? And the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. We only want the best of the best. Me, how much are you paying? Apostrophe. Minimum wage. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times. Was the worst jobs. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running. But management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions. So you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. The question was subtle red flags. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed watching this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.